Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 5.9 gigahertz wireless spectrum for vehicle infrastructure applications overview and review of proposed FCC rulemaking sponsored by the National Operations Center of Excellence. Thank you for attending today, and you will hear from our speaker shortly. We'd like to remind you that today's session does have a topic in our website discussion forum. You will see the link on your screen there. Please visit after the webinar if you have questions or want follow-up information. Many of our presenters will be there to answer questions. I want to now introduce Paul Steinman, who will introduce the rest of our presenters.
Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to show my screen here in a second, and once that is live, we'll get started. All right, awesome. As was stated, this is the overview and review for the proposed FCC rulemaking for the 5.9 gigahertz wireless spectrum for vehicle and infrastructure applications. The purpose of the webinar really is to offer each of you some insights onto what the history of is going on with the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, our current status, and some of the recent developments specifically with the rulemaking process. We're going to highlight some key roles and how this spectrum plays in the deployment of our connected vehicle program and other applications revolving around that. And we're going to have some very esteemed speakers present information about how this proposed rulemaking and comment period, why it is important to us, and what we need to do as industry counterparts to make sure that our needs are heard and understood. This webinar is co-sponsored by AASHTO's Special Committee on Wireless Communications and Technology and AASHTO's Subcommittee on Transportation Systems Management and Operations. Thought I would very briefly share who these groups are and how they intertwine in this concept. The Special Committee on Wireless Communication Technology, which I am the chair of, our key roles really are to monitor the developments within the wireless communications community to make sure that we have secure and sufficient frequency assignments for all our department needs across the country. And we represent all these transportation departments and its members before any of the federal agencies that may be trying to affect those different frequencies. And specifically today, what we're focusing on, and some of our technical working groups that are involved in this, is our spectrum management and our future and emerging technology group, which is really addressing how these frequencies affect connected and automated vehicle world. We're also going to be hearing from the Subcommittee on Transportation Systems Management and Operations, which is chaired by Blaine Leonard from the Utah Department of Transportation. And Blaine is going to give us a brief update on this subcommittee's perspective on how this is going to affect their plans here in the future. And that update will be coming here in a brief second. So what is our concern about the possible rulemaking, and how is that going to affect our potential deployment and deployment status of what we have going on? We have several connected vehicle deployments that are utilizing the spectrum right now. Obviously, if we have extensive sharing with the telecommunications industry, while we're not completely sure how that sharing would totally affect us, we all know that there's plenty of possibility for other interferences which could affect our safety critical operations that we would be expecting this frequency to have with our automated and connected technologies. So what we've done today is we've put together some transportation industry experts that can basically talk about these different parts to how that could affect us, and how AASHTO and these subcommittees are working to collect the comments for this proposed rulemaking, and we'll have these subject matter experts on board to brief you on those issues. Comments are due by July 7th, so that's the window is short, so that's why this webinar is so critically important to us. Now, I would like to introduce Blaine Leonard from Utah DOT and let him give us some brief comments about his perspective with respect to his subcommittee. Blaine?
Thank you, Paul. This is Blaine Leonard from the Utah DOT. I chair the Connected and Automated Vehicles Working Group inside of STISMO, the Subcommittee on Traffic Systems Management and Operations. Is our sort of our mothership, if you will. That committee is chaired by Shaylin Batt out of Colorado, and we are a subgroup within that. We are focused on connected and automated vehicle technology and all of its aspects, but we certainly recognize that many other groups within AASHTO and within many other transportation-related organizations have interest in and are engaged with connected and automated vehicle technologies. So we're delighted today to be sharing space on this webinar with Paul Steinman and his group and others who are bringing some of this information to the fore. Of course, the primary crux of this presentation today, this webinar today, is about the 5.9 gigahertz communication spectrum and the FCC's proposed rulemaking to potentially share some of that spectrum. So I look forward to hearing from some of the experts, and then later on I'll be giving some comments from a DOT perspective about what's being presented and offer some suggestions from a state DOT standpoint. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Blaine. I'd also like to introduce Mark Crosby. He's president of Enterprise Wireless Alliance and also one of the executive officers of the Land Mobile Communications Council, which is a group that we as DOTs work with to address spectrum sharing. So, Mark, I would open the floor to you to offer some opening comments as well.
Thank you very much, and I certainly want to thank Gamata for the opportunity to participate today. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody that the FCC has an insatiable appetite to feed broadband, whether it be licensed or unlicensed. And, you know, there are no bands lying around for broadband below 10 gig. Literally, it's EWA's view that all bands are potentially on the table. If not now, it'll be just a matter of time, being inevitable that bands will be reviewed for broadband purposes. In 2010, the Commission stated the FCC has a number of tools at its disposal to make spectrum usable for broadband, including changing allocations and modifying service, technical, and auction rules. For some bands, reallocation may be the appropriate action. However, for others, reallocation may not be practical, and they're going to look for other approaches. A year ago, Chairman Wheeler said the job of the FCC is to exercise its authority with both discretion and determination so that technology, competition, investment, and consumer empowerment are able to work together to reach the nation's broadband goals. And just 3 days ago, Commissioner O'Reilly suggested that the FCC put as many bands as possible on the table to determine whether individually or collectively they can be used for dynamic new wireless offerings. And in each band, we must look at the incumbent uses and study whether sharing is possible without causing harmful interference to current offerings. He also said, while he firmly believes that if spectrum can be cleared, and I don't think that's the case of 5.9, that it should be auctioned for exclusive use licenses. So the Commission's got a couple approaches, and you know that 5.9 is embroiled in all of this. The Commission repurposes bands and relocates incumbents. Well, I don't think that's going to happen at 5.9. That's the plan for T-band, 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz rebanding in the current incentive auctions. I think the flavor that's really the technique spectrum management that is really in play is advanced sharing through either real-time dynamic, real-time sharing through a spectrum administrator, devices that know where they are, geolocation and sensing capabilities. And examples are TV white spaces, 3.5 gig, AWS, M-band, medical body area networks are sharing with aeronautical mobile telemetry. 4.9 is going to have an awakening. I think there's going to be dynamic sharing at 4.9, and will not be particularly allocated exclusively for public safety. And of course, 5.9, they've suggested detect and avoid. And of course, the other technique that they have, which I think also is applicable here at 5.9, they're going to separate disparate technologies within the targeted bands. And again, they did that at 800. There's a proposal at 900. They may do that at T-band. And I might close with this last quote, and this was 3 days ago in Stockholm by Commissioner O'Reilly, speaking specifically at 5.9. More unlicensed airwaves in this band, 5.9, could lead to lots of good things. More wireless hotspots, less network congestion, greater speeds, and faster innovation. It's all about consumers today, and despite the great applications that are in 5.9, but I almost have to collaborate with the FCC and work closely to protect the fundamental purpose of the band. But again, high-level views, there's a lot of momentum. 5.9 is one of the bands. Obviously, it's being targeted for broadband use. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. So what is the agenda here for today? We're going to have Steve Bayless and Stephen Narla give us some of the history and overview of the current FCC rulemaking. We're going to be, Peter Montecuria is going to talk about spectrum sharing, and then we're going to have some proposed current rulemaking concepts that are going to be discussed by Blaine Leonard, Hideki Hata, and others. So with that, I will turn it over to Siva and Stephen, and thank you for your time today.
Steve, go ahead. This is Siva.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and I apologize for coming on a little bit later. It's been as was mentioned before, there's been a dramatic uptick in activity at the FCC, but the one thing that we've recognized, however, is that this issue is the issue of DSRC spectrum sharing has been greatly politicized to an extent that we probably couldn't have imagined just a few years ago. Just by way of introduction, I'm Vice President at ITS America. Right now I'm covering policy and external affairs. And ITS America has been one of the stewards, I think, of the spectrum. We developed the technical service rules, and we asked for the spectrum. We petitioned Congress and the FCC in the late 90s, and then we worked to develop the technical and service rules that are currently being addressed now in this new NPRM. In the context of spectrum sharing. So the history, as many of you have may or may not know, is that this spectrum was essentially was a gift from the FCC to both the folks that focus on auto technology and then folks that focus on infrastructure road technology. And it's been it's been a long process. We've had a lot of development of the foundations in the technical and service rules to establish interoperability and security. There's been a lot of activity in standards organizations such as IEEE and SAE. And then there have been there's been a great deal of work at the application layer, such as the work that Cooperative CAMP, which is the Crash Avoidance Metrics Partnership, a collaboration of the autos, to develop 5 basic B2B applications. And then there have been a smattering of states and universities that have developed vehicle-to-infrastructure applications. So what has sort of brought everything to head, which was already mentioned, is the FCC's insatiable appetite for a new spectrum. And sorry, just a second. And sorry, I'm going to skip through some of these slides, but the one how we ended up to where we are today is in 2013, Chairman Janikowski announced that he wanted to open up the 5 gigahertz band all the way up to the top of the band, which is which is ours, the 5.9 gigahertz allocation. And on the docket, the FCC asked for proposals to share the spectrum. And in the beginning, there weren't any particularly concrete proposals or proposals that could really be sort of addressed from a technical perspective. Since that time, there's been two proposals that have emerged, one from Cisco and another from Qualcomm. These are the two proposals that the FCC is currently asking for comment on, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily on these two particular technologies. The first is detect and avoid, which involves detecting the presence of signals. It uses essentially conventional dynamic frequency selection, listens for whether cars or infrastructure nodes are around, and then it backs off. The other proposal is rechannelization, which basically takes all the safety-related communications to the upper part of the band and pushes it up from the lower part of the band to the upper part of the band, and then it rechannelizes the bottom part of the band. This rechannelization, and they claim that that lower part of the band that gets rechannelized will also be shared. However, they don't really go into any detail as to how that actually happens, and they may have actually forfeited on coming up with a specific solution. But these two proposals both have advantages and disadvantages. The one thing that, all things being equal, one of them would force, would impose a great deal of cost on folks that have already developed equipment and applications and standards, which would be the rechannelization proposal. Rechannelization proposal is essentially a de facto reallocation, reallocating 40 of the 75 megahertz for exclusive Wi-Fi. The one thing that, let me just add one thing. When I mentioned politicization, the FCC typically in their regulatory process, their job is to sort of force a decision among stakeholders using their big stick, which is their regulatory authority. And the hope of the FCC has been to force the auto industry and us, the infrastructure folks, and the Wi-Fi community to come up with a solution that that is mutually acceptable. The problem with and so it's been up to industry to really come up with a solution. Thus far, we've seen that the proposal from Cisco has been very active in courting the auto industry, and specifically has been already done some preliminary work with Denso, which is the major manufacturer of onboard units, and is pretty well positioned and to at least earn the respect and has a working relationship with members of our community. That counts for a lot. Again, the issue is how polite these spectrum sharing protocols are going to be. That's the Cisco side. The Qualcomm, and I would probably say cable industry, because cable has basically been the proponent of the rechannelization proposal. They have not actually approached the autos. They've not really worked with folks in the ITS community at all, and in fact have said some pretty mean and nasty things about us, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in just a second. So part of it, there's the big political, there's the regulatory political, and there's also this industrial political, where we have a lot of big industry interests sort of maneuvering, and right now it's essentially the auto industry against the cable industry, and that's the way, if you've read any of the press that's been out there on this issue, that's usually the way the media has portrayed it. I won't go into details, and I apologize for skipping through slides. One thing that we've seen with I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right slide, but one thing that we've seen recently has been, as you may know, there's that NHTSA has pushed a proposal, notice of proposed rulemaking, up to the White House for their approval. The notice of proposed rulemaking for V2V communications is a major milestone in the deployment of DSRC. A lot of folks think that if you don't get the NPRM, it'll be very difficult to deploy the system in vehicles without a federal motor vehicle safety standard. The reason why this has gotten suddenly very political has been that cable industry has been actively lobbying the White House to essentially prevent this rule from getting through. They had issued a letter on May, I think it was maybe May 4th or April 28th, to the White House, to the President, basically claiming that there was no meaningful use of ITS in the band and that they were seeking the President's action, whatever that meant, to promote the spectrum sharing protocol that they were invested in, which was the channelization proposal. This this action, I think, was rather prejudicial towards us. It didn't paint ITS or the whole connected vehicle project in a very good light. Also, what we've seen is a couple of think tanks in Washington, D.C., specifically Public Knowledge and the New America Foundation, OTI, publish white papers that have suggested that DSRC is either not ready for, that is either not cost beneficial, or that there are major issues related to DSRC related to security and privacy. And in fact, one case they even criticized they've been criticizing a lot of NHTSA research that was conducted, and also posted to the notice of proposed rulemaking that they issued in 2014. They had all the time in the world to talk to NHTSA about it, but they decided to go straight to the President and voice their criticisms to the White House. So they haven't been playing. They've been playing some dirty pool and have essentially been trying to knock down the whole program in a way that I think has really doesn't suggest that they want to work closely at all with the community or want to come up with a proposal that's mutually acceptable. That's just my opinion, but I know that a lot of folks in this space feel the same way. The hope is, however, that the White House will push through the V2V rulemaking, which will make things a lot easier. The V2V rulemaking has had fairly widespread support from the auto OEMs, so we're hopeful. The White House has also been making a big deal about how important connected vehicle and automated vehicle is, so for them to turn their back on V2V would probably be a damage to Obama's legacy and even Secretary Fox's legacy. So we're hoping that we were successful at the White House. What we're not very hopeful about is the spectrum proceeding before the FCC, and one of the reasons is because as was mentioned before, there's a bias towards mobile broadband. I wouldn't say it's there's some good public policy reasons for supporting mobile broadband. But we've already had three commissioners that have basically come out publicly saying that they're in favor of a more aggressive approach for spectrum sharing, more supportive of what would be the cable's interests. O'Reilly, who's famous for blogging, has said things that I could probably suggest might get him into trouble later if there were ever legal action, but he's definitely shown that he hasn't. He's already made up his mind on this particular issue. So we basically have the chairman to convince, and I think the chairman is as a former cable executive, might be more willing to listen to the cable argument rather than to ours. So that being said, we have to be a lot of you, I'm hoping, are going to go on the record with the FCC. I think what needs to be done is especially for those who have, not just those who feel strongly about the SRC, which there are a lot of, but people that have actually spent money and invested in their time or resources, definitely need to go on the record and let the Commission know that if, all things being equal, if you've got two equally good spectrum sharing protocols, the rechannelization proposal will likely affect you adversely. So you had relied on the FCC technical service rules to your detriment. You'll be forced to rechannelize and re-standardize, revalidate, and test. If you're an equipment manufacturer, if you're a state DOT, you will have wasted your money deploying the SRC earlier because the FCC will have, by regulatory fiat, made all of your equipment non-compliant. So these are some of the issues that are at stake. The one thing that the Commission has been asking are questions about how real is DSRC, what is the distinction between mobility and safety applications, as if that really makes a difference when it comes to the sharing protocol. What are the technical and policy reasons for differentiating safety and safety of life services? A lot of these issues, to be totally honest with you, are not are only relevant, are not necessarily relevant to the issue of whether there's a spectrum sharing protocol or not. I think what they're trying to suggest, it's a bias towards suggesting that the use of DSRC is not an efficient use of the spectrum and that it would be better used for other purposes. So a lot of it is, and a lot of the questions that they ask are really not questions that the FCC has for agency. Are the real questions for our USDOT. With that being said, I'll just say one other thing, is that one of the strongest cards we've had to play is the safety card. And we all know this, that this has been a public policy priority for traffic safety, for public safety, and for public health. And so it's very difficult for the FCC to make a change that would bias those policy outcomes. The one thing I would say is that the other side, the cable industry, has basically been suggesting recently that DSRC is not that they've been questioning the safety benefits. They've also questioned whether there are other technologies that can serve the purpose. And recently they've been suggesting that the system is insecure and will violate your privacy. And they've even gone so far, a couple of the think tanks have even gone so far to suggest that the FCC should open up thinking about petitioning the FCC to open up an inquiry onto the privacy and security aspects of it. And again, the reason why they're doing this is because they want to suggest that what we're doing isn't particularly noble. It's not a it's not a valid public policy priority, so any decision that affects us shouldn't be taken, need not be taken very seriously. So with that being said, I'll just leave it off for the rest. But there are a lot of we've come a long way. There's definitely on the I've been talking a lot about the policy and the public relations part of it. On the technical part of it, there has been a lot of work, and there will continue to be work by the FCC on the testing of these two proposals. The FCC will, in their public notices, suggested that they'll do some testing. They'll throw it over to DOT for some real-world testing. The hope is to have some sort of solution by January 17th of 2017, which is conveniently into the next administration.
Thank you,
So there's a lot of different aspects, and if you have any, I'm not sure if we are open for questions, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to stay until the end of the webinar, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And if you have any questions, I'll give my email to the organizers, and you can contact me directly.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Sivan Arla, and I'm the Senior Director of Transportation Technology here at ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers. As one of the three co-signees on the letter that ITS America had prepared, and we strongly believe as part of the ecosystem here, we have as our membership the cities, local agencies, as well as private sector participants. But one of the key questions in terms of what we are trying to grapple with is, ITE as well as AASHTO and other SDOs like the ITS America and others, we have been in the infrastructure space for quite a bit of time and trying to bring all of our infrastructure up to the V2I and in a sense to the vehicle interface. One of the things that we are strongly in support of is maintaining the situation or maintaining the current DSRC ecosystem so that this can now become real and be tested on a large scale. One of the key points that we have raised in the letter, and one that ITE strongly supports along with AASHTO and ITS America, is that we are just beginning to see the full-scale deployment, or we will begin to see as GM rolls out its first set of cars in the commercial space. We've had quite a few research sites and deployments. The question is, as we are beginning to get into the commercial space, as we are beginning to get into the privacy and so many other aspects, we believe that the safety aspect might be more demanding than we believe we have seen so far. That is my opinion as a technologist. Now, and I do want to emphasize that we have already seen in Europe and other areas where privacy and cybersecurity getting added on as a need, and thereby I believe these messages or the safety-related spectrum needs would multiply, would actually become heavier in terms of messages, and also would need more criticality and more stringent what you can consider is communication that would have a higher need, both in terms of the richness of it and the need therein. So one of the things that we are working on is trying to understand what the overarching needs are in terms of privacy and security. We are also trying to understand how we can ensure that as public agency owner-operators, we are meant to provide a level of service, we're meant to provide a level of confidence. And having a spectrum or having a major change to how the DSRC is being designed or the ecosystem is being built could disrupt it. And I believe that is one of the concerns we have, and we strongly support the statements that Steve Bayless has made on behalf of ITS America, as well as the joint statements that we have made as AASHTO, ITA, and ITS America in support of. We are not in any way trying to preclude sharing. The question is, we need to ensure that this spectrum has the agencies have the ability to maintain privacy, safety, and also the overarching need to create a level of service and a level of confidence with the infrastructure that we own and operate as stakeholders. So I think that is one of the key points I want to make, is that as another public agency owner-operator association, also with private sector participants, we have the dual role of ensuring that the innovation can happen, but it also needs to be happening in a manner that is both safe and has a high level of reliability to it. So having said that, I do want to thank Paul and the opportunity to speak on behalf of IT and as a technologist. Thank you. Paul, who's next? Right there?
Yes. Next up is going to be, just one second, I got to switch my screen here. We're going to have Peter Monaker talk about challenges with spectrum sharing.
Hi, everybody. Challenges, yes. Well, I'm supposed to be one of the author of the comments we're preparing, which are due 1 week from tomorrow. And it is a significant problem. We're under a triple whammy here. We're trying to argue to an audience, most of whom is predisposed to ignore everything that we say. They don't want to hear what we are going to claim. And we have to do it in a very short time. And what's worse, the spectrum sharing challenge in both the sense and avoid scenario and the rechannelization proposal involve details that most of our audience is not going to understand. So it's a real challenge. On the other hand, I agree with previous speakers that it is of significant importance, and that's why we're all here trying to make it happen. The sense and avoid proposal would share essentially all of the channels that we have. That is a real concern to me. I have seen sense and avoid proposed, tested, and tried in a number of scenarios, and generally it has failed for reasons, among others, that Larry Head wrote me about. He apologizes he couldn't be on the call today. He's on an airplane. He asked, for example, in the sense and avoid option, what is the impact of sparse vehicle density on the sense part of the protocol? If the messages are broadcast and only exist for 0.002 seconds, that's 2/10,000ths of a second, then what is the probability the sensing device will detect it? Not much. Is it possible that the sensing device will miss the message? Will it sense it over a period of time? All these kinds of technical questions. Larry raises excellent points, and to my understanding, sense and avoid is a non-starter, but they all involve very technical details, and it's going to be difficult to put them in a way that will be convincing. The FCC, to echo Mr. Crosby's remarks, is very much in the purview of Congress here. Congress has ordered the FCC to make more spectrum available. So these comments will be watched not only by the industry, which is largely against us, but also by the Congress. The rechannelization option, about which Hideki Hata's excellent series of slides will offer some very good ammunition, is another prospect that is very technically complex. I notice in the recent comments, for example, that the Wi-Fi folks have already assimilated the reserved DSRC channel at the bottom of the band between 5850 and 5855. About 3 months ago, they started talking about the band edge being 5855, and I went, okay, that was easy for them. The problem here is, even if they were to be allowed to share a couple of the lower channels, which is what the rechannelization proposal is about, these are wideband services, and they bleed over considerably into both adjacent sides. And DSRC is operating necessarily very close to the noise floor, so it has to be very sensitive. So any interference that comes down is likely to cause trouble. One can argue about the noise floor. One can argue about the interference levels. Or one can argue about the emission masks. But there are certain facts that are indisputable. For example, if you raise the noise floor by 3 dB, it will double the requirement for roadside units and thus multiply by 4 the infrastructure costs. Another fact that's indisputable is that we will have adjacent channel interference. If we let them into the 172, 174, 176s, you will hear them to some extent on all the other channels. The FCC recently ruled on relaxing the emission mask for the adjacent spectrum, that is up to 5850, which is the bottom of the DSRC allocation. And they were opposed on reconsideration by several groups of automakers, which argued that there's going to be interference. And the FCC basically said, well, we're actually decreasing the allowance of interference from what the rules now say, so we're not going to revisit that decision. So our problem here, if rechannelization becomes a serious option, and of the two, I think it is the more dangerous, is to quantify the need for the channels that we would be giving up by sharing, and also to argue that the kinds of standards that they have revisited in the lower adjacent emission mask are not applicable to interchannel analysis of DSRC. I hope I've not gotten too far into the weeds here. I do want to say that to the organizers, I am very grateful to them having put together this meeting. I know I'll be able to use many of the slides that I have seen so far in the joint comments, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Peter. And now we're going to hear from Blaine Linder from Utah DOT, and he's going to discuss how this is going to affect his portion with the connected vehicle applications that the DOTs across the country are trying to implement. Blaine?
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to everyone who has joined us today. This is an important topic, and we appreciate everybody being engaged. I guess my first question is, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also want to thank Gautam Murthy from AASHTO, who helped spearhead the organization of this webinar today and kind of helped gather everybody together and push it forward in a really short time frame. And Steve Laverance and his team from the National Operations Center of Excellence, who is technically hosting this, putting this out there for us, and is providing all of the background and technical support to pull this together. This is really helpful for us to be able to do this. I'm not advancing my slide here. Hang on. There we go. Cooperation is the key, and there are a lot of us who are involved in connected and automated vehicle aspects. I happen to chair the Connected and Automated Vehicle Committee of AASHTO's STISMO group. On this slide you can see us. I put us in the center simply to point out some of the collaboration that we have going on with other groups. There are 2 other AASHTO committees that we have engaged with over the past 6 months on various connected and automated vehicle issues, the wireless communications technology group at the lower right-hand side that Paul chairs, and the traffic engineering group we've also had some discussions with. We also were very involved in collaboration with the V2I Deployment Coalition, which is an organization that involves AASHTO, ITE, and ITS America, and they have 5 technical working groups, and our committee has been collaborating with all of them on some of the activities that they have going on in this space. And they have some oversight from the Connected and Automated Vehicle Executive Leadership Team, which we're also engaged with. Those are the 2 kind of brown boxes. There is also a Connected Vehicle Pooled Fund Study Group that's been around for 12 to 15 years, and we have a lot of crossover members from our state DOTs who belong to the Pooled Fund Study, and so there's a lot of collaboration there as well. So there's a lot of resources here for those of you who are on the call who want to get engaged in the spectrum issue and others, and the cooperation between these groups is really important. This is a kind of a complex slide that shows some of the communication interaction that's envisioned in the connected vehicle space, and clearly there are a lot of ways to communicate data, and as we move into connected vehicle reality, some of that data will be transmitted over cellular and some by satellite radio, and a lot of it by 5.9 gigahertz dedicated short-range communication, or DSRC. And so I've circled those key 5.9 gigahertz links where the vehicle is talking to other vehicles, is talking to us as infrastructure owners and operators, and is talking to other users, including pedestrians and bicyclists and transit users. The key importance of the 5.9 gigahertz band is latency. It's important that the messages being sent between the vehicle and these other entities happen in a really short time frame in order to be able to respond, for the driver and the other vehicles to respond in safety critical situations. So the 5.9 gigahertz band, although it's not the only way to communicate connected vehicle information, is really essential to the effective use from a safety standpoint of the connected vehicle applications. I am not a spectrum expert. A DOT, ITS person, and I suspect there are many other people on the call today like me who may have not understood everything that's been talked about in the last 30 or 40 minutes, and I fit into that category. My goal here in the next couple of minutes is to offer some thoughts to people who are at my level, who are DOT folks at a state or a local level, who are working with ITS solutions, who are involved in connected vehicle and automated vehicle technologies, and need to know how to be engaged with this spectrum sharing issue at a level that we can understand and respond to reasonably in this very short time frame. As has been indicated, the FCC has invited people to update and refresh the record on these potential sharing solutions, and there's been some good discussion of the 2 primary sharing solutions that are out there. We're under a fairly short notice in that we need to respond by next Thursday, the 7th of July, and our responses need to refer to this ET docket number 13-49. So if you're proposing to respond, keep that in mind that you need to do that. Graphically, this top bar shows what the current DSRC band looks like. The 5.9 gigahertz is really 5.850 to 5.925. And it's divided into a series of channels, and the channels are numbered 170 through 184. And again, I'm not an expert in all these channels and what goes on. In this particular diagram, a couple of those channels are being called public safety channels, and one of them a control channel, where control information is sent back and forth. And then other data relative to our applications goes over some of these other channels. The detect and avoid proposal simply, as has been described earlier, argues that an unlicensed device who's not a public safety transportation device sniffs around in those channels to see if there's any activity there and avoids that channel if there is activity. The rechannelization proposal moves these channels around to different parts of the spectrum. And the important thing that's been said about that is a lot of us have DSRC devices out there and are developing or have developed applications which use these specific channels, and if they get moved around, everything we've done needs to be redone. So I think that's sort of the importance that comes out of understanding the channels based on this graphic. AASHTO is preparing a response, and I think Peter talked about his role in that. The response will go in next week by the deadline, and the response will indicate that spectrum sharing will compromise the functionality of the basic safety message, which is the basic message being sent out by the automobiles every 1/10 of a second. And they're also making an argument that if we change the spectrum in the United States, it impairs our ability to drive across border, essentially, and puts us at odds with what's going on in our cross-border partners, and that's a significant thing. I would like to urge those of you who are on the call who represent state and local agencies, among other people, to consider offering a response by next Thursday to the FCC about what you're doing with connected vehicle or plan to do with connected vehicle, so that they know that there's interest and activity out here. I went through the invitation to respond to the FCC, and it's full of sentences saying, please, we seek comment on this, we seek comment on that. I have pulled out 6 particular items that I think are applicable to those of us who are at a state or local DOT level that we might be able to respond to. I'm not going to be able to respond to some of the technical details of the spectrum sharing proposals and whether detect and avoid will work or not work. But what I as a DOT can respond to is what kind of applications we're working on and what we intend to work on and how that impacts my work. So the first 2 bullets that I want to point out that come out of the FCC document are they're seeking comments on the merits of these 2 approaches and whether rechannelization would require any change in the design of either the DSRC devices or the processing of the data. If you're an agency or a consultant to an agency and you're working on deploying DSRC, you're working on deploying applications, whether it be simply broadcasting the signal phase and timing or SPAT message, or whether it's some other more elaborate application, and you are in a good position to be able to comment on how the rechannelization would set you back to the starting point again, because all of these applications are coded based on information being sent in these various channels. So I would encourage you to take a look at those 2 bullets about the spectrum sharing approach and respond based on the kind of thing you are doing in your agency. These 3 bullets are specifically seeking comments on what we plan to do with DSRC, what use cases can be expected and permitted, what applications are anticipated, providing a projected time frame for the introduction of DSRC deployments, and whether there's any distinction between safety and non-safety related applications. And some of the previous speakers have talked a little bit about maybe what's written between the lines in some of those questions. I think this is a prime opportunity for us, and this is what we plan to do, to outline the applications we're working on, when we plan to deploy them, and in many of our cases, and you'll see a slide from Suzanne Murtha in a few minutes that talk about, that shows all of the applications, all of the deployments that are already out there around the country. This is a good opportunity for us to talk about, okay, I'm putting some DSRC out for these applications, and my next phase is to expand it to these applications and these locations and so on, and describe to them how that's moving forward. I believe, and I'm just me reading between the lines here, I believe that the FCC doesn't think we're serious, doesn't think we're going to deploy, and doesn't have any idea that we already are deploying. Maybe they do, but that's the impression I get as I read through this. So I think this is an opportunity for us to be able to tell them, hey, we're out here, we are already deploying, we're counting on this technology, and we're moving forward to save lives. Now, I plan to tell them that even though the application I'm deploying today isn't necessarily a life safety application, what I'm doing is building a foundational framework of DSRC devices that will be used for safety applications as those come online from the automakers. As we know, GM will introduce devices in one of their Cadillac models this fall that will start broadcasting basic safety message. We want to be ready with devices to be able to start using that data. And so my first phase application isn't safety related, but my deployment is absolutely safety related in its plan. So I think those kinds of things can be talked about. Just as a matter of information for those of you who aren't aware of this, the Vehicle to Infrastructure Deployment Coalition Working Group 1 put out a survey last year of agencies, state and local agencies who were actively working on or planning deployments of DSRC or of connected vehicle applications, mind you, in a general sense, and asking them what kind of applications they're interested in. And this simple bar chart sort of summarizes the states that are, the number of states interested in each of the 72 connected vehicle applications that are listed on the CVRIA. There were 11 of these applications that showed up on the priority list by at least 10 states. And these are those applications, just in a real sort of quick summation. And I think it's useful to know that there are a variety of applications that we, as infrastructure agencies, are interested in deploying and are working towards deploying. Even though by the titles of these labels, the safety applications might appear to be limited to those 3 light blue bars at the far end, curve speed warning and work zone related warnings, many of the other applications, particularly those in the purple bar in signal operations, are absolutely safety related. Queue warnings, emergency vehicle preemptions, broadcast of signal phase and timing, which technically isn't an application, but we've captured it here because people are interested in putting that out there. So it's useful for us to keep in mind as we're preparing responses that there's a broad variety of applications, but many of them are safety related. You'll see a better slide I mentioned from Suzanne in a few minutes showing where a lot of these deployments are. Here's a quick list, not a complete list, of some of the states that have DSRC out on the road today in the left-hand column as either part of an early deployment or some kind of a test bed. Of course, there are the 3 pilot deployment sites on the right side of this slide who will be deploying devices and applications pretty aggressively over the next year. And we in our AASHTO committee, in conjunction with the Deployment Coalition Working Group 1, are working aggressively on a deployment challenge where we're challenging every state to put out in the next couple of years, next 2 to 3 years, DSRC devices simply to broadcast the signal phase and timing message to facilitate the continued development and deployment of connected vehicle applications. So there are already a couple of states who've indicated to us that they're going to jump in and do this in the near term. So there's a lot of activity around this space, and I think it's important to keep that in mind as we respond. We could also, in our responses, reiterate some of those things that AASHTO is going to talk about, that if spectrum is shared, it needs to be done based on tangible test results using actual unlicensed devices to see how they interfere with our spectrum. We want to reiterate that the basic safety message is not the only message that's been planned and defined that will be broadcast, that there are things like the signal phase and timing message and other things that will be broadcast over these channels, and that it's important that we maintain consistency for cross-border applications. And a quick summary of my slides, and I'm sorry that I had a few too many slides here to cover, but hopefully this has been helpful. The 5.9 gigahertz band is essential to the effective deployment of our applications. Before sharing of that band is allowed, we need to really see hard demonstration that there won't be damaging interference from these unlicensed devices. We need to put the message out there that we are deploying as infrastructure owners and planning to deploy aggressively DSRC devices. And I would urge all of you on the call to actively jump in really quickly and respond to the FCC on their request. That's what I've got. Thanks, Paul, for a little bit of time today, and I look forward to hearing from the next couple of speakers.
Well, thank you, Blaine. And in essence of time, we're going to keep moving right along. We'll hear from the OEM perspective. Hideki, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm Hideki Hada from Toyota Technical Center. Now I think that I should have put some cover slide, but today there are so many discussions about this DSRC in different places. So therefore, in my slides, let me explain why we are doing this one from the back to the basic, and also what we have done and where we are going. So the first slide that shows the toward the realization of 5.9 gigahertz DSRC systems. So these are the one, the start point. So motivation is many car companies, also the road infrastructure owner-operators, one of the common goals is to improve the safety on surface transportation. Then we develop many camera systems or radar systems, but we all totally believe there's communication between vehicles and also with infrastructure that has a great potential to improve the safety. So that's the motivation, and this motivation has not changed the last 10, 15 years. And since this technology, the vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure, that requires between OEMs interoperability between vehicles and infrastructure. So therefore, not only the U.S. but globally, there are partnership between the government agencies and also the private sectors to create common technologies. So those are the sharing the kind of policy and direction of the technology R&D, and also creating a common technical standards, and also toward the deployment of infrastructure and vehicles. So those discussions have been happening, and at the end, currently the discussion and activities have moved from the simply discussion and research and development to actually deployment. So this is the stage, and the picture now illustration above that one, the cooperative ITS product, it shows many different applications, but you can see we have been considering many different applications. It's not only the V2V intersection type thing. So there are so many other opportunities. And now again, we are in now deployment phase. Please go to the next slide. Yes. So this one, I found a great slide from the Dr. Kanianthara's presentation in 2013. So this pie chart showed what kind of crashes we have in the United States. I think many of us know the rear end, road departure, these are the common accidents, unfortunately, and the intersection. And the technology for vehicle technology have evolved significantly, and we can address many of these rear end and road departure. However, the intersection is one of the missing area for advanced technologies. This is where the V2V or V2I can play a significant role, also pedestrian. Then road departure and rear end, these maybe not road departure and rear end. So these are the areas the onboard sensor, the camera, radar can do good amount of contribution to the safety improvement. But the addition of the communication as a third sensor, that will definitely also improve the situation. So that's why we've been working with our industry partners, government agency partners. And please go to the next one. Yes. So this is the kind of very brief summary of what we have been doing. So almost like 10 years of R&D efforts, because from OEM perspective, the technology we implement in our product system is thoroughly tested and fully reliable, and it can operate for 10 years and 15 years. So that's why the R&D has been also done very thoroughly. The early days, under the name of CAMP, there's early days that try to prove the concept of vehicle to V2X operation. Then that has evolved into the V2I safety application development, V2V development, and also confirmation of the mobility. And that was a large-scale deployment of infrastructure, maybe one of the first things in the United States. In 2007, 2008 in Michigan, we also tested the proof of concept of the entire V2X operational systems. And most recently, 2-3 years ago, and there's a large-scale validation of these V2V applications and systems. So those are done in multiple locations in the United States, and a large, more than 2,000 car operation was done in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Also, those efforts, not just only creating technologies and proving it, and those results are reflected and incorporated into the common industry standards under SAE and IEEE, then they became solid. And also, since the V2I includes the government partners, therefore there are several activities under VII Consortium, V2I Deployment Coalition, and Vehicle Infrastructure Integration Executive Leadership Teams. So these are the multiple facet government industry discussions happen, and now focus is to make this happen in the United States. Please go to the next one. Thank you. So this slide shows the largest feasibility validation of the 5.9 systems in the United States. The first one was really proving at different places, close to 700 regular customers. Does it work, and do you think it contributes to the improvement of safety? So they have done. The government industry have finished this large-scale operation and confirmed these V2V applications will have good potential for the safety improvement. Therefore, they moved into the second phase in the actual deployment of the V2X systems and very large area in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So they deployed infrastructure as well as more than 2,000 vehicles and confirmed that these applications and supporting systems work well. And also participation from almost all major OEMs at that time. Then those are the research efforts. Then please go to the next one. Then those are, previous ones are research and development efforts. Then as I mentioned in the beginning, that we are shifting to the deployment phase. So there's some samples, and ITS Connect is actually in Japan, but Toyota already sells V2I and V2X products starting from last year. So these some applications are shown on the bottom in the illustration there. You can see these applications are very similar to what we have been discussing in the United States, V2V and V2I applications. At the same time, in the United States, General Motors has taken a great initiative to announce their product release plan. So that was done during the ITS World Congress in Detroit. But this is a very great initiative by General Motors to actually make this announcement. And this is the product announcement, and also we also support the enhancement of the current DSRC operation in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So that's what University of Michigan and its Mobility Transformation Center. So they are supporting the expansion of the DSRC operation in Ann Arbor and also Southeast Michigan. So we would provide cars and volunteer our cars to be equipped with those DSRC and creating the real environment for DSRC operation. Then please go to the next one. As I said in the beginning, the safety is the common goal, and therefore the private sector and the government agencies, we've been talking potential applications. Then there's a long list of potential applications, and also recently through the V2I coalition, V2I deployment coalition, ASHTO and those people, then we went through which ones are real high potential for applications, high interest about these applications. It was very interesting to see the interest from the automotive side and interest from the government infrastructure owner side. That's very similar. So those are the highlighted in red. On the left side, V2I safety, so that's the intersection type safety applications. Those the work zone, the traffic jam at the work zone, so that kind of application, V2I application. The V2V is the common ones, emergency, electric brake, and intersection type applications. So again, the intersection is a very good candidate for V2X product applications. On the right side, since we use the same technology, we started seeing some operation of the cooperative ACC using the V2V to enhance the current adaptive cruise control. This is sold already in Japan, and then but I think many people already have technologies, and this will really improve the operation of the stability of the adaptive cruise control. Then that may not have a safety impact. However, that can also eliminate or reduce the fluctuations caused by the system or the driver. So therefore, the traffic flow should also become more constant, making reducing the potential risk for potential collisions. Then please go to the next one. So I tried to show some of the video doesn't work well on WebEx. That's why I put those links, and I can explain some of the motivations for these safety applications. top left is the V2V type application, the emergency extended brake light and also end of queue alert. So they're basically same thing. And the video will show the actual video crash scene in the highway in Michigan. There was a very bad visibility due to snowstorm, and the drivers cannot see the pileup until it is too late. So this is the range highway speed at 70 miles per hour. So it's also too late for camera or radar sensor to see. Then this is the perfect opportunity for DSRC, because if 10 seconds before this moment, if the driver has known there's a traffic slowdown, he or she could have reduced the speed just a little bit, but that little bit can avoid collisions. And this also, when I see this on the communication portion, this is a good example of continuous uninterrupted communication is very important, because ahead of time, 300 meters or 10 seconds before, the communication should follow this DSRC DSRC communication. My car should follow what's happening ahead. So it cannot be brake, coupon, brake, the video. That kind of interruption is totally unacceptable. So that's why we see the DSRC is the best means to avoid this kind of collision situation. The right side is also intersection type collisions, and this is also a common target area for both private sector and also infrastructure side people. Then there are so many different kind of intersection collision scenarios, but you can see later you can see these videos and see the DSRC. With DSRC, that the cars know each other, where they are going, and potentially avoiding the collisions. And also the bottom left, the advantage of the DSRC is it also has a communication congestion mitigation. So as soon as we start selling these cars, some cars go to New York or Washington D.C., those very congested area, but there's already communication congestion protocols already incorporated, so we can handle many cars and many infrastructure situations. The last one on the right bottom, it shows the enabler for the connected automated, meaning the DSRC is original automation certainly for safety, but it can be used for cooperative cruise control. And this is only the longitudinal control, but this communication, using almost the same basic safety message, can be used for cooperative merging or cooperative driving, all of these connected and automated driving. Then please go to the next one. Then this slide has a little bit more text, but let me emphasize that currently DSRC has 7 channels, and 178 is control channel. But other than that one, all 6 remaining channels are called service channels, and they will be used for these V2X applications under the name of public safety. So these are where all communication channel very important, and each channel, each service channel, whether the 72 or 181, so they will carry critical information. And like I saw in the previous slide, that the intersection type collision scenarios or the highway type traffic jam collisions, you can see that any information becomes very important. And also the same thing for fact 3, that they can carry, even though the basic safety message is if with a benign message data about the current situation, then that has a very important safety aspects and safety implications. Then the last one is similar to the previous slides, continuous uninterrupted real-time communication becomes very important. And also it should be noted the recent discussions, maybe last year or so, that because of we are hoping for the initial NPA area, but based on that one, sometimes our discussions are totally too narrow. We address those intersection type scenarios like IM, intersection movement assist and left turn assist, as the only applications in some narrow defined discussions. But it's not true, like mentioned in the previous slides, that though there are so many potential applications developed, and that'll be coming at once deployment starts under the name of safety. So all channels and potentially all communication band will be used for B2B, B2I, and B2P applications. Then please go to the last slide. The last slide is my summary, and both the automotive side and also government side, we see the common goal of using this kind of DSRC communication for improvement of safety. So it's very important for us to have been working on this one and coming to see the realizations soon. And based on those partnership, the standards and standards application systems, those are basically validated, and we are waiting to deploy those systems. And also, it's very interesting to see the road and vehicle don't usually talk, those constituencies don't talk each other that much, but our interests are very similar, like Blaine said in his slides. Their interest, state DOT interest, are very similar to the OEM interest for the applications. And also the last one, we see the big potential of using this 5.9 gigahertz DSRC for product systems for improving the safety. So therefore, this should be the real-time, uninterrupted, and no interference communication. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll transfer to the next speaker, Suzanne.
Thank you, Hideki. Now we're going to get the industry perspective from Suzanne Murtha. Suzanne.
Hello. So I want to echo some points that a lot of other folks have already made, and I'm going to try to highlight some points that folks can emphasize when they are making their response to the FCC. So let me introduce myself. My name is Suzanne Murtha. I'm the executive director of an organization called OmniAir, and OmniAir advocates for certification in the ITS industry. Also, we're working on executing certification plans and certification services for DSRC equipment, and that will be for the US DOT pilots as well as post-pilot deployments. And we're working on getting ISO accredited for that right now. We have been helping, and I also work with a consulting company called Atkins, and with Atkins we help state clients deploy DSRC, among other things. So I have experience with a lot of investments and a lot of efforts that have been made to bring DSRC to market. So I wanted to take this chance to, here's a slide that explains OmniAir, what we do. We are encouraging all of our members of OmniAir and all of our clients at Atkins actively to make a response to the FCC, to the comment period that's here, and that's largely due to the fact that we've already visited FCC and spoken to them and showed them some data about deployments that have already been done. I've also met with folks who are in opposition to using 5.9 for vehicle safety, and one of their main arguments, most frustrating arguments, is the fact that nothing has been done. That's what they say, and we know for a fact that that's not true because we've all seen deployments of 5.9. We're all working on it, and I want to make sure that we all take some time to highlight that. I borrowed this slide from US DOT. The US DOT guys actually took a lot of this from information that OmniAir has filed with the FCC in the past. So please feel free to use this. We can't use this particular slide, but if you'd like, I can send you the list of all the deployments. When we make our responses to FCC, I want to make sure that all of us are emphasizing the work that's been done, the investments that we've all made, and the locations where we've deployed DSRC. One of the things that we have not all been great about is filing for FCC licenses before we deploy our equipment. One of the things that's required is before deployment is getting an FCC site license. There are only maybe a dozen or so site licenses on file with FCC, so that's something that we need to do that helps show the FCC that there are deployments of the equipment and there are planned deployments of the equipment, and there just aren't that many on file. So we need to do that better. I can help you do that. Call me. I can send you the form. Do that. And when you respond to FCC, let's show them what we've done as an industry here, please. And if you'd like a list of these locations, I can also send that to you. I wanted to also talk through really quickly some of the certification work that's been done with FCC. You'll see on the left side of your slide there's a smaller oval inside this Venn diagram that shows the work that's been done by USDOT and OmniAir members to put together certification requirements for the pilot deployments that are in Tampa, New York, Wyoming, and now Ohio. We've done some certification work for those pilots. In addition, our organization is working overall to build deployment certification requirements past or post-pilot deployments. So everything other than the pilot deployments. And so we're using our membership. We're using input from the device manufacturers, from the deployers, and from other manufacturers as well to put together those requirements. And we've invested several $1 million to date, close to $10 million in putting together some of these requirements for certification and for the industry to be able to actually deploy this equipment. So that's another part that's really important to highlight in your FCC response is the investments that you've made. Because like another wise speaker already said, one of the issues here is that FCC doesn't think that anything has been done, despite the fact that, I personally have been in front of the Commission several times showing them where it's been done. So we need to highlight that in your response. I'm going to be short here and make two call to actions. I'm going to highlight them. First, reach out to me. I don't have this on here, but reach out to me if you need a draft response document. I have one I can give you. You can, from OmniAir, you can take it, you can reuse it, you can rewrite it, you can do whatever you want, but it's the correct format so that this doesn't become cumbersome for you. It's not a tough thing to do. If you need help sending in a response, I can help you with actually executing that as well too. So so take our example and respond to that. And the second call to action that I want to make here in the last few minutes here is file your FCC site license when you're deploying. And that'll help make a statement, too, that you're planning on actually executing a deployment. And with that, I'll pass the baton.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. We have a little bit of time for some questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in on your message screen there, and then we'll be reading those, and we'll get the proper member of our panel to respond to your questions. So are there any questions out there that folks would like to bring forward?
We have quite a few questions. The first one is radio location going to be part of the 5.9 band? 75 megahertz is not enough for inch accuracy needed in collision avoidance applications. You need multiple 75 megahertz bands, at least a gigahertz apart to achieve this. So I think the first part was the question. And I can skip it if no one can respond to that one.
The answer is radio location is inimical to DSRC, but the questioner is correct. Inch accuracy will not be available because not only are we not going to get another 75 megahertz, but the one we've got is under threat. So thanks for the question, and I wish it would happen, but not likely.
Thank you. Our next question is, what, if any, impact would the new administration have on moving forward? I guess I'm not exactly sure what they're saying. I can skip to the next one. Someone would like a panelist to define real-world testing.
This is Hideki, and I can answer some of them. And so the real-world testing has been done for the DSRC operation, like I mentioned in my slides, and also in Japan it's already sold. And also, and further, part of the FCC request this time is to conduct the interference test in 3 phases by next January, and there are already good test beds to do so, and Ann Arbor, Michigan could be a good place, and some other places like Sudan slide showed. So these are the actual locations we can see the very nice thorough test of this kind of interference issues. And I think it's also very important that it shouldn't be done just for the sake of test. It has to be done very thoroughly to prove that under the real-world conditions, the interference does occur or does not occur. So I think this using the real-world situation is very key to prove interference issues.
Great, thank you, Hideki. The next question is, the FCC needs to process an application to authorize the use of 5.9. Do they have the records from agencies?
This is Suzanne Martha speaking. I have seen about a dozen that are on record, and that's something you can look up online. So anyone who submitted an application, it is up on the FCC site.
Great, thank you.
That said, the actual implementation of a large-scale DSRC system would be practically impossible given the current FCC application procedures. I mean, imagine having to type in 10,000 RSU locations into one of their Java applets. That's a prescription for insanity.
Thank you. And we do have a comment here from Robert Arnold with the FHWA Director's Office of Transportation Management. He has stated one way to get the FCC to notice deployments is that they start actually going through the licensing process. FHWA has published a guide to DSRC process. So he wanted to make that comment. And our next question is, I need more information on the timing for listen and vacate because of the situation with sparse vehicles. The NYC CVPD will be using 6 channels because of the proximity of RSUs at intersections. I'm not sure if any of you all can respond to that one.
Yeah, that's actually wonderful information, and I would encourage the commenter to write, this Peter Moncure, to write me immediately after the call is over. And we'll try and incorporate some of that information into the comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Another person has written, we should request an extension to the comment and reply comment periods. Can that be done?
You can ask, but they don't often agree.
Great, thank you. And another comment here, when the FCC allocates spectrum, it anticipates that product is available for deployment almost immediately. They do not work on the same scale as the transportation segment. That was another comment given to us by the audience. And
that point's well taken and ignored by the FCC, as frequent commenters have pointed out.
Thank you. And there's another comment. Some speakers have suggested that avoid and detect is preferable over rechannelization, yet at least one speaker suggests avoid and detect is also very questionable. Is there any merit to simply saying to the FCC that any repurposing of this spectrum segment is unacceptable?
Certainly, but they're going to require testing, and Mr. Hata has pointed out that this testing can be done and should be done and must be done rigorously.
Great. Thank you so much. And if anyone has
within
anything...
about a minute, this is supposed to be closing, so I had a couple more things we wanted to make sure that we did before we closed up today, so I don't mean to cut your comments short, but what we can do is get those, any additional questions and comments posted as part of this webinar after it's done, because it will go on the National Operations Center of Excellence page for everyone to listen and see all the slides. But I just wanted to thank all of our presenters today. All you folks did a wonderful job, and the information that was shared was it was invaluable to not only myself, but I'm sure everybody on the call. I do want to note that AASHTO is working with the subject matter experts to prepare the comments to the FCC for the rulemaking. So if anyone has any other thoughts or questions that they want to reach out to us, please feel free to do so, and we will make sure those get incorporated, as Peter mentioned a few minutes ago. I also want to remind everybody that those comments are due no later than July 7th into FCC, so the sooner the better. And I realize that we're kind of running short with the fact that it's the holiday this weekend, but please take the time to do that. Gamada, are you still on the line, and would you like to make any closing comments before we wind this up? Yes, Gamada had to leave, so I'll take that as a no. So again, I'd like to thank Gamada for setting it up. I'd like to thank the National Operations Center for Excellence for hosting us, and finally the speakers for all that you have put forth today to help educate us on this this very important topic. And also for all the callers out there, thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and everybody have a wonderful holiday. And back to Stephen at the center.
I believe Stephen is gone, so I'm going to thank again our presenters and Paul for moderating. Please visit transportationops.org, which is the NOCOE's website, for the slides and presentation. Today, the recording will be up by the end of the day, and the presentations that you have seen in this webinar will be up by early next week. So thank you again, and everybody have a great day.
Okay, thank you.